Politics lives in people. It is their experiences. It is their struggles. Now, that quote right there, it perfectly captures what today's explainer is all about. We're exploring this core philosophy that the working class struggle is inherently dramatic. It's not just about abstract policies you read about in the news. It is about the real lived experiences of everyday folks. And honestly, when you put those raw experiences up on a screen, you really don't need to manufacture glossy Hollywood drama. The reality, it's gripping enough on its own.
So, welcome to today's explainer. I am incredibly excited to guide you through the life, the work, and the absolute force that is Ken Loach, a phenomenal film director and dedicated political activist whose career spans an astonishing 60 years. Today, we're going to look closely at how Loach has seamlessly intertwined his unwavering socialist principles with the art of cinema. We'll explore how he literally transformed the camera into a tool for giving a voice to the powerless, and how he pioneered a deeply authentic style of filmmaking that has left a massive, indelible mark on global cinema. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We're going to cover the uncompromising vision, then we'll look at the Loachian method, followed by politics in real people, real-world impact, censorship and controversy, and wrap it all up with a lasting cinematic legacy. Starting right off with Section 1, the uncompromising vision, a working-class lens. To really understand Ken Loach, we absolutely have to start with where he came from, because his background is exactly what fueled this lifelong dedication to the disenfranchised. He was born back in 1936 in Nuneaton, which is a working-class town in Warwickshire, and he actually didn't start out in film. After serving in the Royal Air Force, get this, he went to Oxford to study law, but the legal world just wasn't his calling. He dabbled a bit in acting before finally finding his way to the BBC in 1963 as a trainee television director. And it was there that he began to pioneer the genre of social realism. Now, what is that? Well, instead of focusing on exceptional, larger-than-life heroes, social realism focuses on everyday people. It structurally criticizes the social and economic frameworks, think poverty or a lack of labor rights, that generate such bleak conditions, while at the same time celebrating community solidarity as this vital means of survival. He very quickly became the preeminent voice of this entire British cinematic tradition. Which brings us to Section 2, the Loachian method, designing authenticity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Loach's political ideology literally dictates his practical day-to-day methods on a film set. He brings this incredibly gritty, almost documentary-like feel to his fictional stories, and he achieves this through a very specific set of stylistic trademarks. First off, he heavily relies on non-professional actors to deliver these incredibly naturalistic performances. He also insists on authentic regional dialects, whether we're talking Cockney or Glaswegian. He flat out refuses to ask people to change how they speak, arguing that it alters their personality. And honestly, this means his English-language films sometimes actually require subtitles in other countries. Pretty wild, right? He also favors natural lighting and shooting on location in real streets and real homes, rather than some artificial studio setup. Finally, he relies on a fiercely loyal, long-standing team, most notably his regular screenwriter since 1996, Paul Laverty, and his producer, Rebecca O'Brien.
This all ties back to his core philosophy. He believes a film set should be completely anti-hierarchical. He actively, aggressively rejects that traditional, highly competitive Hollywood model of filmmaking. Instead, he applies his socialist principles straight into production. He believes a set has to be a place of collective solidarity, a place where everyone is comfortable, respected, and feels safe enough to make themselves vulnerable without any fear of being mocked. The director's job? In his view, it's simply to cultivate that egalitarian atmosphere. All right, moving right along to Section 3, politics in real people, the micro to macro approach. Now, why this matters so much is that Ken Loach doesn't just film abstract political slogans. He takes massive, macro-level institutional critiques and embeds them deeply into micro-level, intimate family dynamics. Let's walk through this table, because you can beautifully map out this thematic trajectory across his career. Back in 1966, his BBC docudrama Cathy Come Home took direct aim at housing authorities and the welfare state by showing one family's brutal descent into homelessness. Then, in 1969, Kes delivered a biting indictment of the education system and regional class structures by focusing on a young working-class boy with very limited options. And jumping all the way to 2016, Daniel Blake leveled a totally devastating critique at the Department for Work and Pensions, the DWP, exposing the bureaucratic cruelty of government austerity measures, all seen through the eyes of an ailing carpenter. The crucial takeaway here is that for Loach, you just can't deal by issue. You have to start with human conflict. The politics absolutely must be embedded in the narrative. If you just make your characters stand there spouting political speeches, they become mere mouthpieces for the director, and the film loses its authenticity. By making sure his characters remain real, flawed, and complex people, the audience can actually empathize with them, even when they are the exact types of people who are so often demonized by mainstream media.
Okay, Section 4, Real-World Impact, Cinema as a Catalyst. Let's shift our focus to the tangible, real-world results of his work, because Loach's art acts as a powerful catalyst for actual social awareness. When Cathy Come Home was broadcast in 1966, its docudrama style blurred the lines between fiction and reality so effectively that it completely jolted the nation's conscience. The public outrage and the massive awareness generated by this single piece of television led directly to the formation of the massive national housing charity, Shelter. I mean, think about that. It proved undeniably that cinematic storytelling can trigger massive charitable and even legislative action. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of his critical acclaim. Over his career, Ken Loach's films have won a staggering 117 awards. To put that into perspective, this includes 2 Palme d'Ors at the Cannes Film Festival. He won one for The Wind That Shakes the Barley in 2006 and another for I, Daniel Blake in 2016. Winning just 1 Palme d'Or is literally the pinnacle of a filmmaker's career. Winning 2, that puts him in an elite group of only a tiny handful of directors in all of cinematic history. He also holds the record for the most films screened in the main competition at Cannes. Just incredible. Up next, Section 5, Censorship and Controversy, the Political Friction. Now, as you might expect, a career dedicated to challenging the status quo is rarely a quiet one. Loach is a highly polarizing figure, and we need to look impartially at both sides here. His supporters, they heavily praise his righteous fury. They argue he is a deeply necessary, humanist voice who provides unwavering representation for a maligned and often invisible working class. But on the flip side, his critics accuse his work of what they call miserabilism. They argue that by constantly focusing on the cruelty of the system and showing characters facing devastating defeats, he portrays the working class as perpetual losers, effectively ignoring the real-world histories of victorious and inspiring industrial strikes.
And this friction hasn't just been confined to movie reviews. It's had real consequences. Throughout his career, Loach has faced outright censorship. Some of his early BBC plays and documentaries were literally shelved because their political content was deemed too controversial. He also saw a stage play he directed canceled right before opening, and he has been at the very center of fierce debates regarding his activism and support for the BDS movement, a Palestinian-led campaign promoting boycotts, divestments, and sanctions against Israel. Most recently, despite being a member on and off since the 1960s, he was expelled from the UK Labour Party in 2021 following internal disputes where he refused to disown other expelled members. Regardless of where you might stand politically on any of these issues, it is undeniably clear that he has never backed down from his convictions. Let's move to our final section and see how this all builds. Section 6, A Lasting Cinematic Legacy, 60 Years of Action. Looking back at how this creates a singular, highly influential career in global cinema. From his start at the BBC in 1963 to defining works like Case in 1969, all the way through to his recent Palme d'Or victories and his 2023 film, The Old Oak, which he has suggested might be his last, Loach has maintained this astonishing longevity. But what is truly remarkable is that across 6 whole decades, his values, his subject matter, and his absolute dedication to the working class have remained entirely uncompromising. He truly established a viable global model for politically committed filmmaking. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Looking at the entirety of Ken Loach's career, all the awards, the intense controversies, the overwhelming empathy for the marginalized, it really begs the question, should cinema simply reflect reality, or is it a tool to change it? Loach clearly chose the latter. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into his life and work leaves you wanting to explore his films, and more importantly, the urgent questions they raise about our society.